At exactly 7:00 a.m., I dropped the barbell and the sound detonated across the neighborhood. The quiet shattered, birds scattered, ripples cut through the glass-clear lake behind my house. I stood there in the front yard, lifting heavy steel under a blue open sky, sweat running down my back, chalk dust hanging in the air. The lawn was still perfect. The hydrangeas still bloomed. The rest of the street was still asleep. Then someone screamed, "Stop, you can't do that." I didn't turn right away. I finished the rep, let the weight hit the mat again, boom, and only then looked up. A woman was charging across the grass, voice sharp, posture, rigid authority in every step. "This ends now," she shouted. "You're violating HOA rules." I smiled, wiped my hands, and glanced back at the water sparkling behind me. What I didn't know yet was that this single lift on a flawless morning would ignite a chain reaction that would tear the homeowners association apart from the inside. She didn't slow down when she reached the edge of my lawn. She didn't ask questions either. "Shut it down," she said, planting her heels into the grass like she owned it. Right now, this was Linda Harrison, president of the Oak Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Perfect posture, perfect hair, clipboard clutched tight as if it were a weapon instead of paper. She was the kind of woman who smiled while issuing fines and spoke in rules the way other people spoke in threats. "I'm exercising," I said, "on my property." "That doesn't matter," Linda replied instantly. "What you're doing disrupts community standards." She gestured toward my setup as if it were toxic waste, heavy equipment, excessive noise, visual disturbance. "I've already logged this as a violation." "Logged by who?" I asked. "By me," she said, "and the board will support it." That was her talent, turning personal irritation into official policy. She didn't argue. She documented. She escalated. And she always spoke like the outcome had already been decided. "You're suspended from all community amenities," she continued, "effective immediately. Pool, gym, everything." I laughed once, short and sharp. "I pay the same dues as everyone else." "You pay for the privilege of living here," Linda corrected. "Privileges can be revoked." She leaned in, slightly lowering her voice. "This is your warning. Keep pushing, and this will get expensive." Then she stepped back already, writing already, planning her next move. The first notice didn't come through the mail. It was taped straight to my front door, crooked and aggressive like it wanted to be seen from the street. Bold red letters at the top read, "Notice of violation," the kind of font people usually reserve for emergencies or foreclosures. Linda's signature sat at the bottom, clean, confident, final. Unapproved activity, excessive noise, visual disruption. No warning, no conversation, just a deadline. By early afternoon, she escalated. I spotted her across the street, standing half in the shade of a maple tree, phone held steady at chest height. She wasn't pretending to be on a call. She was filming slow, deliberate pans of my driveway, my equipment, my movements. Every rep became evidence, every breath a liability. When I locked eyes with her, she didn't look away. "Don't stop on my account," she called out. "This is all going in your file." That was when the neighborhood shifted. People who used to wave from their porches suddenly found reasons to look busy. One neighbor crossed the street when he saw me step outside. Another cut a conversation short, mid-sentence. It was subtle but intentional, the kind of quiet pressure that spreads faster than confrontation. That evening my phone buzzed. A message in the neighborhood group chat. Reminder from the HOA. Please avoid non-essential interaction near lot 742 until further notice. Not my name, not even my house number. Just lot 742, like I'd been downgraded to a zoning issue. I stood in my driveway reading it chalk, still dusting my hands, the lake behind me smooth and untouched by any of this. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the grass. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about noise. It wasn't about rules. It was about making sure I felt alone before she came back to finish the job. The next move came from the board, not Linda alone. 2 days later, a certified envelope appeared in my mailbox, return address, stamped Oak Creek Estates HOA in block letters. Inside was a formal cease notice from the Architectural Review Committee, written in that cold, bureaucratic tone that pretends emotion doesn't exist. According to them, my equipment was no longer exercise gear. It was now an unapproved exterior structure. They cited article numbers, subsections, and interpretations that stretched language to the breaking point. Because the rack was visible from the street, it was a visual disturbance. Because it was metal, it was industrial. Because it was heavy, it was non-residential in nature. At the bottom was the real threat. Failure to comply within 24 hours will result in daily fines sufficient to compel correction. No dollar amount listed. That was intentional. Fear works better when the number is unknown. That afternoon, Linda made sure the message landed. She stood at the edge of my driveway with two other board members I barely recognized, arms crossed, surveying my setup like inspectors at a demolition site. "You've left us no choice," she said. "This is now a board matter." "So, you're rewriting the rules," I replied. "We're clarifying them," she said smoothly, "for the good of the community." That evening, another notice hit the group chat, this one carefully worded, carefully vague. "The board is reviewing enforcement actions related to exterior compliance. Further violations may affect property standing." Property standing? That's when I realized the shift had happened. This wasn't one neighbor complaining anymore. This was the system stepping in letters, committees, fines, designed to make me fold without ever touching me. And Linda was standing right at the center of it, smiling like this was exactly what she'd wanted all along. I stopped reacting and started reading. That night, I pulled out the HOA packet I'd been given. At closing the thick binder most people shove into a drawer and forget. I didn't skim it this time. I treated it like evidence. Bylaws, amendments, meeting minutes, financial summaries. That's when something didn't line up. The community gym, the one I was banned from, had been under renovation for months. According to the board updates, it was still waiting on equipment, still waiting on contractors, still waiting on approvals, but the budget told a different story. The renovation fund wasn't stalled. It was empty. Large withdrawals, rounded numbers, repeated payments to the same LLC with a name so generic, it practically begged not to be Googled. I searched it anyway. No real website, no listed staff, just a mailing address tied to a strip mall 2 towns over. I felt that cold drop in my stomach the moment when annoyance turns into something heavier. This wasn't about noise. This wasn't even about control. If the gym stayed closed, no one would ask where the money went. If people stopped gathering, stopped paying attention, stopped comparing notes, everything stayed quiet. My driveway workouts weren't just loud, they were visible. They were pulling people together. And that was dangerous. The next morning, a message popped up in my inbox from a name I didn't recognize. "You didn't hear this from me, but you're right to ask questions." Attached was a screenshot, an internal email chain, Linda pushing to delay reopening. Another board member asking why the contractor had already been paid in full. Linda replying with one line, "Let enforcement handle distractions." That was the moment the stake snapped into focus. She wasn't trying to stop a nuisance. She was trying to bury a problem. And now I had proof that went far beyond a noisy morning. Once I saw the pattern, I stopped playing defense. I forwarded everything to Dave, the bylaws, the financial summaries, the email screenshot. He didn't call right away. That alone told me it was serious. When he finally did, his voice was calm in that way lawyers get when they've found leverage. "This isn't just harassment," he said. "This is selective enforcement tied to financial concealment." The next morning, he walked me through it step by step. The HOA charter required consistent enforcement. Same rules, same penalties, no targeting. What Linda was doing, isolating me, escalating fines, inventing interpretations, created a clean paper trail of retaliation. Then Dave made one call I hadn't expected, the county clerk. By the afternoon, we had confirmation that several HOA filings had been amended quietly over the past year. Meeting minutes revised, dates shifted, attachments added after the fact. Nothing dramatic on its own, but together, it painted a picture of a board trying to clean up its own mess retroactively. Meanwhile, Linda kept pushing. Another warning letter arrived, this one hinting at possible referral to law enforcement for non-compliance. An hour later, a police cruiser rolled slowly past my house, then circled back. The officer didn't get out. He just logged the address and moved on. That night, Dave sent one more message. "They're nervous." He explained it simply: when people in power start invoking police without a clear violation, it's usually because they want intimidation to do what the rules can't. The pressure was real now. Legal language, official eyes, quiet threats meant to make me back down. But the difference was this: they weren't just watching me anymore. The county was watching them. And Linda had no idea how close she was to losing control of the entire board. I stopped keeping it to myself. That was the mistake Linda never anticipated, that I wouldn't fight her alone. I didn't blast anything publicly. No posts, no accusations. I reached out quietly, one conversation at a time. Neighbors I trusted. People who'd been fined before. People who'd complained about the gym renovations dragging on without explanation. The responses came fast. I thought it was just me. "They did that to you too. I paid extra fees and never saw a receipt." By Sunday night, my inbox looked different. Screenshots, PDFs, old emails forwarded with shaky explanations. One message stood out, sent from a board member's personal account unsigned. She's been moving money around. We were told not to ask questions. If this comes out, she'll blame enforcement. Attached were internal budget drafts, earlier versions of the same documents I'd reviewed, showing numbers that didn't match what residents had been given. 6 figures accounted for in one version, gone in the next. That was when Linda made her move. A community-wide email hit everyone's inbox just before midnight. Emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance encouraged. The subject line was neutral. The tone wasn't. The message warned of increasing non-compliance threats to property values and the need for immediate corrective bylaws. No names mentioned, but everyone knew who it was about. She wanted the room controlled. She wanted the vote rushed. She wanted this ended before questions turned into audits. I read it twice, then forwarded everything to Dave. His reply came back almost instantly. Perfect timing. Don't say anything yet. Let her talk. I looked out at the driveway, the quiet lake beyond it, the equipment standing exactly where it was allowed to stand. For the first time since this started, I felt calm. Linda thought Wednesday night would bury me. She had no idea it was going to bury her instead. The meeting room was already packed when I walked in. Not the usual half-dozen bored homeowners and folding chairs. This time people lined the walls. Neighbors stood shoulder to shoulder, whispering, phones already out. The air felt tight, charged, like everyone knew something was about to snap. Linda sat at the front table perfectly composed. Clipboard, gavel, smile, locked in place. "I'm calling this emergency session to order," she said, sharply striking the gavel before the room fully settled. "We're here to address behavior that threatens the stability of our community." She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. She launched straight into the proposal: new bylaws, stricter enforcement, immediate penalties. No discussion, no debate, just fast, decisive language meant to rush the room before anyone could think. "We need a vote tonight," Linda said, "before this situation gets worse." Murmurs spread. Hands went up. Before she could shut them down, the door at the back of the room opened. A man in a county jacket stepped inside, calm and unhurried, holding a folder thick enough to bend. Linda froze mid-sentence, and for the first time since this began, she wasn't controlling the room anymore. The county official didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I'm here regarding irregular HOA filings and a pending compliance review," he said, setting the folder on the table. The sound it made was soft but final. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it again. Dave stood beside me and spoke calmly. "We'd like these documents entered into the record." He slid copies down the table. Financial summaries, bank transfers, email chains, dates highlighted, amounts circled. The room leaned forward as pages changed hands. One board member flipped too fast, then stopped, went back, his face drained of color. "That payment was never approved," someone said quietly. Linda shook her head. "That's out of context. Those were operational adjustments." The county official flipped a page. "Then perhaps you can explain why the original filings differ from the amended versions submitted 3 months later." Silence. Another email appeared on the screen, Linda's words time-stamped unmistakable. "Delay reopening. Enforcement will handle distractions." A low murmur spread across the room. Phones came up. Whispers turned sharp. "This isn't about noise," a neighbor said. "This is about money." Linda's hands tightened around the clipboard. She glanced at the door, then back at the table, her control slipping one document at a time. The room had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Linda stood up so fast, her chair scraped loudly across the floor. "This is a setup," she snapped, voice sharp but cracking at the edges. "You're all letting him manipulate you." No one answered her. The county official didn't look impressed. "Miss Harrison, please sit down." She ignored him. "You don't understand what it takes to run this community," Linda said, sweeping a hand across the room. "Someone has to make hard decisions. Someone has to keep order. That someone isn't allowed to move money without approval," the official replied evenly. Linda's mouth opened again, then she said the one thing she shouldn't have. "I authorized those transfers because delays would have caused panic." The room went dead silent. Dave didn't smile. He didn't need to. "Thank you," he said softly. "That answers the last question." The county official nodded and closed his folder. "Based on what's been presented tonight, we're initiating a formal audit, effective immediately. All board authority is suspended pending review." A neighbor stood up. "I move for a vote of no confidence." "Second," someone else said, then another louder this time. Linda looked around like she was seeing the room for the first time. No one met her eyes. The vote wasn't close. When the gavel finally fell, it wasn't in Linda's hand. Her clipboard slid from her fingers and hit the floor, loud, hollow, final. That was the moment her control collapsed in front of everyone she'd tried to control. No one spoke for a few seconds after the vote. Then the room exhaled. People who had been silent for months, years, even started talking all at once. Not yelling, not accusing, just finally letting things out. Someone mentioned a fine they'd never understood. Another neighbor admitted they'd stopped using the gym because they felt watched. A woman near the back said she'd been scared to complain after getting a warning letter with no explanation. I stayed where I was and listened. That was the strange part. There was no cheering, no celebration, just relief. The kind that settles in your shoulders when you realize the pressure is gone. A few people looked at me and nodded. One man mouthed, "Thank you." Someone else squeezed my arm as they walked past. It wasn't about me winning anything. It was about everyone realizing they weren't alone anymore. Through the windows, I could see the lake outside the community center, still and bright under the lights. Same water, same calm morning waiting on the other side of all this. For the first time since Linda had marched across my lawn, the room felt lighter, quieter, like the neighborhood had finally been allowed to breathe. The county official stayed standing while the room settled. "For clarity," he said, voice steady, "this review isn't optional." He explained it plainly. No legal theater, no long speeches. A formal audit would begin immediately. All HOA accounts frozen. All board authority suspended until the review was complete. Any financial decisions made in the past year would be re-examined line by line. Linda tried to speak. The official raised a hand without even looking at her. "If wrongdoing is confirmed," he continued, "charges will follow. Restitution will be required. This association will operate under temporary oversight." Phones buzzed across the room as people checked emails already coming in, official notices, timestamps, confirmation that this wasn't just talk. Dave leaned toward me and quietly read from his phone. "They're also issuing a directive. No homeowner amenities can be restricted without documented cause, third-party review, and a full board vote." That sentence landed harder than anything else. The weapon Linda had used, quiet suspensions, vague violations, sudden bans, was gone. A man near the front let out a low whistle. Someone in the back laughed, not loudly, just relieved. Linda sat frozen, staring straight ahead, as if none of it applied to her anymore. Because it didn't. The system she'd relied on had just turned inward, and it wasn't stopping. The meeting broke slowly, not in a rush, but in small, quiet movements. People gathered their things, talking in low voices, now calmer than before. A few stopped near the front table, looking at the empty chair where Linda had sat for years, like it was a landmark that no longer mattered. No one followed her when she finally stood and walked out. No one said a word. I stepped outside into the night air and stood on the concrete steps of the community center. The lake across the road reflected the lights perfectly smooth, unbothered, exactly the way it had looked that morning. Same water, same calm. The difference was us. My phone buzzed once, then again. Messages from neighbors asking what time I'd be lifting tomorrow. Someone joked about bringing coffee. Someone else asked about stretching for bad knees. I smiled. By the time I got home, the driveway lights clicked on automatically, illuminating the spot where the barbell had landed at 7 that morning. I stood there for a moment, hands empty, listening to the quiet I hadn't had to fight for. Linda had tried to control the neighborhood with silence and fear. All it took to undo it was a little noise, a little steel, and the refusal to back down. Gravity never broke the rules. People did.